Warm welcome to everybody. Today's panel discussion is going to be on neutralizing the cyber threat spike. And this is brought to you by the Economic Times and by Sophos. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to all the panelists and as well as all the people who are joining in to listen to us and partake of the insights that will be shared today. We have a very strong panel here today. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharya. I'm senior editor of the Economic Times. I will host today's discussion. Before we get into the discussion, let me introduce the panel to you. We have Anand GA, India CIO and AMEA Customer Experience Lead of Mondelez International. We have Porno Ghosh, Vice President and Group CIO of Minda Industries. We have Balaji Rangachari, Global CIO of Tata Consumer Products. We have Ajay Khanna, Vice President of VECV. We have Rajpreet Kaur, Senior Principal Analyst with Gartner. And we have John Shire, Senior Security Advisor from Sophos. John is instantly joining us from Toronto, Canada. And he informs us that it's just 1 degree there. So he's actually sitting there in a t-shirt looking nice and cool. And 1 degree, of course, is usually cold for people like us in Delhi, right? But that is what context is. So let's have a little context for the discussion now, right? So, even before COVID, digital technologies were being adopted very, very fast. The speed was picking up, even though we would have liked it to be faster than what it was. And even at that time, the specter of cyber attacks of different kinds, that has always been among the top priorities of enterprises. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, what it has done is that it has created a whole new paradigm, right? Because with the pandemic, people are all going digital. Companies are racing to become more digital in a world that is locked in by a virus, in a world that is locked in by uncertainty. You don't know how long you can, go on and do physical meetings or travel. So this race has, to be more digital. This has led to an expected rise in both cyber threat perceptions as well as real cyber attacks. So, for example, cybersecurity experts say that the rush to provide remote access to employees by restructuring network and security systems during the lockdown, this has made India vulnerable to ransomware attacks. Then one survey report says that 7 of 10 Indian companies saw an increase in cyber attacks since the lockdown. Another report says that 66% of Indian companies have faced at least one data breach since March. That's a lot of companies, right? And that's a lot of data breaches. So such a situation you would normally expect that to lead to a huge spurt in investments in cybersecurity. Companies should be really getting down to putting in money there. But because of the pandemic and the lockdown and remote working, things have panned out a little differently. Being in business seems to have taken precedence over being in business safely. And that is something that, we need to consider very seriously. In fact, a recent CXO survey that was done by ET points to the same kind of, inference. And that is a worry because cybersecurity really it needs to be towards the top of the priority list for companies and probably needs to be deliberated even during board meetings. That I've had consultation with board members of large organizations and they said that cybersecurity is something that we really need to be discussing in the board meetings. It's all imperative because cyber threats are rising by the day. Phishing scams are, hitting online shoppers during festive season. Hackers are targeting employees who are working from home and other remote locations. And even IoT devices are opening up a completely new threat vector for hackers and other cyber criminals, right? So these are very serious issues for businesses. And I'm very happy that we have such a strong panel here today that we, from some of India's top organizations. And I'm hoping that today's discussion will throw some light what companies can do, to neutralize this spike in cyber threats that has come about. So to start things off, I would first like to invite John Shire from Sophos to give his opening address. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alokesh. Yes, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. It's 5 a.m. here, but I've got my coffee ready and I'm ready to go. So hopefully I don't fall asleep on you guys. Cybersecurity. What is the reason for cybersecurity and how do we do it? Well, it's all about managing risk, right? And managing risk means understanding what the landscape looks like and then doing something about it, implementing products, implementing policies, and just acting in a certain way that is more secure than maybe you were doing it in the past. And so from the Sophos point of view, I'll give you just a little bit of a view of the landscape with respect to India as well, specifically into what's happening out there, so that we can manage that risk. this year has been tough for a lot of people. And what's happened is we've had to do things like move to work from home. And a lot of companies did that without any proper planning. They didn't have the existing infrastructure to do it, the equipment. And a lot of companies also didn't have the monitoring in place. So that makes it really difficult. If you want to be able to provide remote work for your employees, you have to make sure that they have some computing device. A lot of companies were still using desktops around the world, right? I was a part of a roundtable recently of one company that all they had was desktops, and they actually had to rent trucks to put all the desktops on the trucks and drive around everybody's home and drop off all the desktops at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was a really big job for them because they hadn't planned for it. Whereas another company, they were a financial services company, and their whole business continuity plan was working from home. So for them, it was flip a switch and then everybody's working again. So everybody had different plans when it came to the pandemic. When people think of business continuity, it's more about things like, fire and flood and tropical storms and whatever else physical kind of damages you can think of. Not many people thought of a pandemic. When it came to equipment and monitoring, it was difficult sometimes for some companies to be able to understand, well, where are my assets? Are they online? Are they receiving patches? Because we've been at this now for 9-10 months. I forget. It's been a bit of a blur, right? What's the health of these assets? Can I still have visibility into them? So all these things present some risk. They introduce risk into the environment, and then we need to be able to manage those. And all of that has presented an opportunity for scammers and cyber criminals to really ramp up their attacks on everybody. And we've seen different spikes at different times of the year over the course of this past year because of the pandemic, and using the pandemic as a reason and a lure for a lot of their scams and opportunities. In the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of the scammers that were normally focusing and targeting on things that would, disaster relief aid type scams, the pharmacy scams, the sextortion scams, all these types of scams switched to a COVID-themed scam. In early April, we started looking at cataloging all the domains that were being registered on a daily basis for anything that had to do with coronavirus or COVID. So if it had COVID in the name or coronavirus in the name, we would log that, and we found over 1,700 domains at just the first looking. So the scammers were really on top of this thing and trying to generate some sort of financial incentive for themselves. Thankfully, not a lot of that really worked out. But then the cyber criminals picked up on it and started using COVID and coronavirus and other associated terms as part of their campaigns as well, their spam campaigns, to bring malicious documents into the environment. And that was all under the guise of trying to keep people safe. So they'd craft a lure that would say, here's some information from the CDC or from the World Health Organization or from your local health authority saying this is what you need to do to stay safe, and then they'd be packed with malware. If we look at the most pernicious threat that we've seen for years now, that we're still seeing this year, ransomware obviously is the big topic for a lot of organizations. We did a survey in 2020 about ransomware, and globally 51% of organizations who responded to our survey said they were hit by ransomware. And of those, almost 3/4 actually had their data encrypted. And now we're seeing something a little bit different with the extortion piece. And about 1/3 of those victims paid for an average of $732,000. That was the global numbers. Now, if we look at India, 82% of companies in our survey were hit by ransomware, with 92% getting encrypted. So it's quite a drastic jump from the global average. And fully 2/3 of companies were paying the ransom at an average of 1.1 million. Companies are getting hit, and they are having to do something about it, and sometimes that means paying the criminals, which then feeds money back into the machine. The other interesting stat is the detection time for threats in the network. If we look at the detection time, the average detection time for global companies is about 117 hours, so just under 5 days of being able to detect a threat in your network and then do something about it. In India, it rises to 228 hours, or 9.5 days. So you're still almost double the amount of time of finding the time. And this might be due to a variety of things, right? Maybe you don't have the necessary tools to do that, or maybe you're suffering staff shortages like everybody else around the world and are struggling to keep up with the volume of cyber criminal activity that's going out there. But the bottom line for a lot of this stuff is basic security is lacking. So we're still not patching enough. We're still leaving hosts that are hanging out on the internet with like RDP. We're using weak authentication, not multi-factor authentication. And ransomware is getting nastier. The groups are diversifying. The payments have gotten much higher. We're seeing payments in the multi-million dollars now for some companies. And the extortion bit works, which means that not only are they encrypting your data in many cases, they're also stealing it. And you're incurring maybe some regulatory fines on top of that. And we've also seen a stratification. So we've got different groups of different skill levels within the ransomware ecosystem now, from the very low skill level where anybody can pay to play to the very high skill level attackers who are doing a lot of hands-on work inside the target networks and are breaching, laterally moving, privilege escalation, all that stuff. And it used to be that the high-end crime guys and some of the APT guys would learn from nation states about how to do their hacking. Now the nation states are turning around and they're saying, well, we're just going to blend into the background and do the same thing that the high-end criminal guys are doing. So there's been the landscape is more difficult now in terms of detecting, is it a nation state? Is it a script kiddie? Is it a regular cyber criminal who we don't know, right? With all this doom and gloom, there's an opportunity, as Allokesh meant, for digital transformation, for improving things, and that doesn't just mean from adding more firewalls and more VPN capacity. It means thinking about security, thinking how security affects the business, thinking how security can enable your business, and then taking those opportunities and putting them into the different aspects of the business. And this is a chance at doing things like zero trust, right? Of basically saying, we don't care where you're working from. Now, I know this isn't for every industry. Obviously, there's certain machines that you can't do that with, but for as much as possible to move to that zero trust model will make this transformation and this transfer of shifting work location much easier. So, I think we're going to have a good discussion about this today, and I'll turn it over now to Rajpreet to give her opening.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, Rajpreet, over to you.
Thank you, Allokesh, and thank you, John, for highlighting some great points. I think they have covered a lot of points. I think what I can start with is what exactly has changed for us in terms of infrastructure and why 2020 and moving forward is going to be challenging. Why? Because more user work performed off the enterprise network than on enterprise network. There are more workloads running in IaaS than running in the enterprise data center. More applications consumed via SaaS than consumed from enterprise infrastructure. More sensitive data located outside the enterprise data center in cloud services than inside. More user traffic destined for public cloud services than to the enterprise data center. And more traffic from branch offices heading to public clouds than to enterprise data center. While the year 2020 has been challenging for all of us, particularly the security and risk management leaders in technically emerging countries like India, had been fighting and battling on how to secure the data, which is not within the perimeters and boundaries now, but also a huge shift in the culture. India traditionally and the emerging countries have not traditionally welcomed work from home, remote working culture. So we, in a sense, never had an infrastructure in which even more than 50% of our employees could actually work from home. From the recent conversations which I had with the CIOs, they had started offering and allowing C-level executives and providing them access to some of the resources. We have been always talking about and slowly moving towards public cloud and SaaS applications, but the 2020 actually accelerated all of that. And like Allokesh mentioned, that cybersecurity has not been a board level initiative. So the decision of adopting SaaS, public cloud, be it PaaS or IaaS, has primarily been business and totally ignoring ITs. Talking to CIOs and CISOs on a daily basis, the typical challenges which we see is, and they discuss with us, is that our business has already embraced multi-cloud, and now we have to protect the data which is hosting on it. So as the business is growing digitally, somehow cybersecurity is not growing with it. So what we have observed, particularly during 2020 through our client interactions and by reviewing multiple threat intelligence sources, several changes to the threat landscape due to COVID-19. Just to summarize that, the volume and sophistication of malware hasn't changed, like we have been discussing. Still ransomware attacks, still phishing-based attacks. But the primary shift has been in the tactics used by malware actors for initial exploitation. However, the situation is evolving rapidly and will continue to change in the near future as we move beyond these initial phases of the pandemic. The primary risks that have emerged during this crisis follow risks from home and public networks, increasing attack on remote services, business email compromise, and phishing tactic changes, fake website distribution, misinformation, and malware. Um, as a specialist in network security, we saw a spike in the inquiries and client interactions where the organizations were under attack, especially their web applications. So open APIs have been exploited. A lot of bot-based attacks are being targeted towards a lot of enterprises. And this is not only limited to large enterprises, but a lot of mid-sized organizations were targeted with attacks. And then the increased APT attacks on healthcare and essential services. So I'm glad that today we all are here to discuss on the best practices, initiatives, and the best of the recommendations which we can give and share with our peer groups on the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajpreet and John, both of you, for your talks. Some very, very pertinent points. Actually, John, and I know some people who had to port their desktops home from office. Yeah, because they did not have laptops, so they actually, hired a cab and took the desktop to, for home from the office. So I think, talking about hiring trucks to deliver laptops and all, we had to hire trucks, here to get your desktop home. And regarding the scams that you said, now that the vaccines are here, there are vaccination scams doing the rounds, right? So I mean, the scams.
It's the pandemic has been one of these events where usually when we see scams that come out of a disaster. So prior to the pandemic, the big sort of disaster that was on top of mind of everybody was the Australian wildfires, right? So there was the half of Australia was on fire, and there was a lot of push to give aid to the firefighter relief funds and those kinds of things. Usually when things like that happen, it's one thing that's driving the scam. With the pandemic, it's just there's multiple opportunities to drive the scam. First, it was what is what is this virus? What's it going to do to me? How do I stay safe? Then it started morphing into, well, do masks work or do they not work? Should I stay home or should I not stay home? And then President Trump and all his rantings and ravings added more fuel to the fire. And now, as you say, we're in the vaccine phase. So now there's another opportunity for scammers to throw more stuff onto the bonfire and say, well, who's getting the vaccine? And they can sow discord around, these people are getting it, these people aren't. It works, it doesn't work. So there's all sorts of opportunities. So this is really one of these threat events, if you will, that has continuously provided fuel for the cyber criminals.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so, Rajpreet, you're right. Let's now take advantage of the panel that we have here, and get some understanding as to what are the recommendations and what can be done, in this. So let's start with the, core question that we have been, all of us have been just mentioning that there's a lot of increase in threat perception in cyber attacks in recent months, ever since the lockdown hit in particular. So I just want to ask the panelists whether, what kind of spike did you notice in your industry or in your organization, and perhaps we could have some examples of cybersecurity measures that you took in the last few months, which helped address this new, threat perception. So maybe we can start with Porno and then go around the table.
Hi, thanks, Alokesh, and, thanks to all the other panelists. Thanks to ET and also Sophos for organizing this event. Very pertinent topic, and I think I have spoken around 10 sessions in last few months on the same topic of cybersecurity. So I'll hope I'll not do any repetition who have already heard me, but I'll try to keep it short and crisp what we have observed in our industry. And when I talk our industry, means I'm not talking about my company, because I also represent ACMA, which is Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. So I'll talk about the scenarios which are happening across ACMA organizations and how people are trying to combat, or I will say prevent the threats in terms of what is happening at this point of time. So when, on 22nd March, we were actually, pushed or forced for this lockdown by the national government. And immediately, we had to do the similar things what we were discussing earlier, like example, shipping the workstations, or especially the engineering workstations, to the homes of the R&D engineers or the engineering, teams. So this is one of the activities we did. We also allowed, use your own device in certain cases, because in manufacturing, as you know, 40% of the workforce do not carry laptops. They are using desktops in the shop floor. And
Right.
hence we need to also allow their personal laptops as use your own device. And we also rolled out the policy that what is required and what is not required in your laptop to use it for the official purpose. The interesting part is we are having 69 locations in India and also around 7-8 locations abroad. But as soon as the pandemic started happening, we were actually pushed from 69 locations to 4,000 plus locations. Every home became a location of the organization because it's part of the enterprise now. You are connected through the platforms, you are connected through mails, you're connected through different portals, or intranet and something like that. So I think the attacks which we received, and there are two types of attacks. When I talk attacks, means there are something like example, some machines are getting compromised, and then it starts, sending spams outside the organization. So we have to prevent those from the ports and other devices, so that these spams do not get generated and it gets blocked. Second type of attacks is cyber attacks to our network. Now, when I say network, it is 69 locations plus the 4,000 locations which are part of my network. That means the work from home locations. And there we did some certain things which I'll come later on. So the attacks we received is one like botnet attacks, very frequent botnet attacks we were receiving. Phishing attacks, I think just now Alokesh mentioned, I think a lot of phishing attacks happen. In fact, one of the attacks happened in my mailbox itself, and my mails were getting deleted and going to the deleted folder. And we were able to contain it immediately, and I think 3 of the workstations were in fact infected. We got it clean, we isolated from the network, and immediately we got rid of that.
The
It happened
scammers
just
obviously targeted the wrong person. That's interesting.
True. So then another type of attacks is like example, the ransomware attack, as you rightly mentioned. We were able to prevent around 10 ransomware attacks, and it happened from our friend countries who are, our neighbors, especially from China and some other countries, Russia and Asian countries. We received those attacks, and also we were able to prevent those attacks. And then the fourth type of attack we had is called homograph attacks. Homograph attacks is nothing but like you say Minda, but it is MINDA. So it is not MINDA.
Yeah.
So MIMINDA.com, and you think it's our company. You click on that, you do some certain exercise there, and then your system gets compromised on the fly. So this homograph attacks is one of the attacks we received. This is also one of the interesting, and it's not about our computers or mail. It happened on the mobile phones. So it text messages or WhatsApp messages, and then it said, please log into Minda. They are giving you certain example ABCD or something like that. So I think these kind of attacks started happening. And the last attack we had was wire transfer fraud attacks. I believe John is an expert in cybersecurity. He knows what is wire transfer fraud. Wire transfer fraud attacks are nothing but you receive a mail, a wrong mail from your chairman saying that please pay to this company guy in UP bank such and such, and this is the name, and this is the like example some details, and this is for this purpose. And then without understanding anything, sometimes the mail ID is also masked. You don't understand it is Mr. Nirmal Binda or something else. So you just see Nirmal Binda and then start, paying the amount, and you get into a kind of trouble. So what we did is, now I'll come to the points, and I'll keep it short because I think other panelists, we must listen to them. So what we did is basically we immediately started the awareness programs for all the 4,000 white collars as soon as the pandemic started, because we understood this is going to be a huge opportunity for the cyber attackers. Second thing is we implemented a DLP solution, data loss prevention solution, for all our R&D and engineering, workstations and laptops, where the design data and the drawing data is residing, because that's most important from an automobile company in terms of your customer, drawings and designs, and these has to be protected at any cost, any point of time and at any cost, because these are our intellectual properties. Third is we also did, implementation of an employee productivity and a monitoring tool. This is very interesting. I mean, we did it also, this implementation on the fly through internet. So we sent a link to everyone, and everybody installed that. And there was an auto configurable system which installed the system in your system, in your device, whether it is an official device or a personal device. And we got it installed for all the devices, and we were able to monitor their productivity as well as their traffics, what is going on and going in and out and something like that. So these are the few of the things. Apart from the two things I'll just mention here, one is we also invoked the SOC services, Security Operations Center services, very recently, just 6 months back. And we have received a very good result from the SOC services, which is basically an extended arm of your organization who helps in detecting and preventing, all the kinds of traffic which is coming into your network, especially on the mailing traffic and the other web traffics. And the
Right.
last thing we have recently done, very recently, is cyber insurance. So cyber insurance also is a new topic in India. Like in your other health insurance, car insurance, or your factory insurance, you also get cyber insurance for your organization, and you can protect to certain extent. There are a lot of clauses, like what kind of defaults are happening or what kind of attacks. You have to give a lot of data to the insurance company, but you can get your cyber protection done. And if you are seriously paying some money for ransomware or any kind of other kind of losses happen to you, this money can be recovered on a due course. So I think these are the measures we have also taken with respect to the cyber attacks.
Yeah, actually, cyber insurance is increasing quite a bit now, because of all these attacks and all. But I'll just stay with the automobile industry, and I'll come to Ajay. Ajay, you found similar kind of, issues that Porno is speaking about. What has your experience been, and what measures have you taken?
Alokesh, I think being in the industry, some of the issues have been very common. And in fact, the talk about having computers being sent on trucks or in vehicles to employees' homes, etc., we also did have that kind of a challenge, but that was a very limited one. While we started, we knew about such kind of a thing is going to happen. We started planning early in early March itself, somewhere about first week of March. We started anticipating such kind of a things, and then work from home will become a possibility. So we started planning a lot of these things very initially. While we say that, okay, network connectivity is available everywhere, we saw that as a major challenge in terms of getting people connected when they have to work on large documents in terms of they need high-speed bandwidth, high-speed network, 4G network. So people did not have that kind of a connectivity also. So we immediately put in place, tied up with service providers to buy in quantities of 4G cards, data cards, and broadband at locations of employees. So that actually that was done very initially in the first month itself, and so then it streamlined the entire operations from work from home, and people have been still working from home. A lot of population is still working from home, while we have resumed manufacturing operations from a plant operation site. Our corporate offices now working from office. From a challenges perspective, yes, phishing scams, etc., were there, but we had put in a mechanism for detection of such phishing mailers and then prevention of those mailers. We also put in EDR solutions for employees, whether it was their personal device or it was an official device. So it was taken care of so that none of those devices which are connecting to our network are seen as a threat from a perspective of malware or from a virus domain. So another thing which we also noted was that not only the scams were targeted on the organizations, but these were targeted towards the government sites also, which were vulnerable. Yeah. And we did have certain incidents where information or currencies were taken over from the government sites, information was stolen from there and used for some other purposes, not the intended purposes. So those kind of scams were there. And I think while we go into the discussion forward, we will, when we talk about additional topics, I think there are certain suggestions which are there and which also we implemented, which helped up in terms of recovery of some of these areas where we found that information has been taken away, and then we could recover money back from taking the help of those agencies.
Okay. Let's come to the consumer products side now. We have two very large companies, Tata Consumer and Mondelez. And what has your experience been? Because in terms of cybersecurity and cyber threats, is there really a differentiation between industry, or are you facing more or less the same issues? And what is the nature of the spike? Maybe Anand, you could go first and then Balaji.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alokesh. I don't see too much of a difference, but there are some subtle differences, I would say.
Okay.
If you see what are attackers looking for, yeah, they're looking for data, they're looking for some kind of revenue through ransomware, etc., or they're looking for some IP like design and stuff like that.
Right.
So therefore, we did see a spike in phishing. We did see a spike in DDoS kind of attacks on some of our consumer websites. So in a way, it is similar, though flavor was slightly different. And for us also, allocation, you see, we have a very large, and I'm sure it would be the same for Tata as well. A large part of our workforce is out on the field, and enabling the field workforce is a primary response that we had to work on, and therefore we had to be careful about that aspect for us. We are also being again in the consumer goods industry, new product launches is another area that we had to enable, and therefore that again becomes a sort of a target on cybersecurity. So that's a second area that I would say is a weak spot or an opportunity for attackers. See, overall, we benefited. I mean, there are pros and cons, right? I mean, being a global organization, your target area is also increased because something that happens in another country also affects you. But you also benefit from the global scale of certain things. Like, for example, we have a global SOC, and we increased our monitoring. That's the first thing we did. We got in analytics into monitoring, so we were able to significantly reduce our incident response through analytics. But most importantly, and I think this would hold true across industry, the biggest the weakness or risk is always the human factor, right? And that's where we will need to continue focusing on our own employees in terms of awareness. So, for example, work from home suddenly exposed a lot of employees to behaviors that the digital footprint increased for the organization. The perimeter increased, and therefore you are having people who are not used to working in that environment potentially exhibiting more risky behaviors, right? So you had to educate them. So we ran multiple awareness programs with employees on these kind of risks, etc. So it's a combination of these things. And also, like I was mentioning, I don't think any of these attacks were new. I mean, I think they changed their profile. The flavors changed. I mean, you always had phishing, you always had ransomware,
Okay.
but there was a huge acceleration in this whole thing. And luckily for us, and I'm sure a lot of other food and beverage companies, we are on the path to moving to the cloud, and therefore security is different. It's better. You're able to be more agile, etc. So we also accelerated some of our initiatives on that front. So that's a flavor from our side. And last but not the least, the most important thing, again, coming back to when I said the three things that I believe that people could gain from, which is either data or assets or some kind of malicious attacks on revenue, etc., ransomware. For us, data is most important, and like Porno was mentioning about DLP, that's another area we ramped up big time on, and I know some of the other companies in the FMCG area who have also ramped up on DLP side, because again, and a lot of this may not be malicious, it may be unintentional, but you need to put in the guardrails technically to prevent data leakage. So that's in a nutshell of my perspective on this.
Okay, thanks. Balaji, your views on this? Are you also ramping up on the DLP?
We've got, so actually it's an interesting point. We had DLP in our plans to do for this year.
Okay.
Pushed it out to next year, but kind of I'll talk about it a little bit. It's definitely on the radar, but it's a little bit kind of pushed through next year. I'll give you a little bit of context of why that is. And so first of all, I kind of completely go with what Anand said as a FMCG or a CPG industry, and the dynamics are exactly the same. I can resonate with almost all of the points that he talked about. Also, in terms of the kind of incidents, what Pawan said and what Ajay talked about is also very similar. So from a context perspective for Tata Consumer Products, there were two things that were critical for us, right? For maybe 6 months or a year before the whole pandemic and the lockdown, we had migrated completely to the cloud. We'd become a cloud-first company, right? So
before COVID hit.
Yeah, well before, right? So it was part of a plan, and a year before we went to cloud, not just in terms of, so we have put data centers at all, zero footprint, everything goes on the cloud before. And secondly, we moved out from private data networks to internet-based networks. So we moved our entire network to a public internet-based network along with the cloud, right? So in terms of what we had from a day one perspective, we already had some sort of a zero trust network already set up. Our security was completely internet-based, and which meant that as far as we were concerned, we pulled a switch in some way or form, and people were able to connect quite seamlessly. Having said that, our challenges was more around something that Anand, I think, kind of alluded to in terms of the field force and the field sales force, and we were just beginning to fructify integration with sort of the foods business, and we were coming. I mean, in February we had kind of started integrating two businesses, and we had a large sales force that were coming with their own devices. For us, it was like putting into place some of the principles that were set up, but that was coming into practice, right? So, the way I kind of look at it in terms of where we are, what helped us was the fact that we had a multi-factor authentication and a single sign-on set up for every user, right? We had a true zero trust based network connectivity, and all users were anyway coming in on the internet, right? And then we had set up a strong endpoint security, and all of the device management platforms were in place, right? So those were some of the things that really helped us protect from a cybersecurity perspective. The challenges really is, and I guess if you look at any cybersecurity framework, it talks about the proactive and the reactive part, right? So trying to identify what are the assets that we are protecting and what is it that we need to really look at, right? So the identification and the protection part, we work on the NIST framework. So the identify and protect from a NIST framework perspective was where we had significant amount of challenges, right? So it doesn't help if you say that 98% of my end computing devices are protected if that 2% includes the CFO and the CEO, right? So that's really the level of detail that we need to go into. And a lot of people talked about user awareness, and people talked about how we drive education. To me, those are the things that are really critical and important allocation.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Balaji. And we have quite an interesting strand, but there is one question that I would like to ask both John and Rajpreet, and it's about, because you interact with so many CIOs and CISOs, and you're always interacting, with the industry. The thing that we mentioned that I initially spoke about, that cybersecurity needs to become a board, agenda, board level agenda. It needs to be taken more seriously. Do you see that happening? Do you sense in your interactions with, senior people, do you see more and more, senior, the cybersecurity issue being taken up at a higher and higher level? John?
In some cases, yes. So I think the message is coming across that cybersecurity does need to be taken seriously at all levels of the business. What I think tends to happen in a lot of companies is cybersecurity gets tucked under IT, and then the priorities of the IT business end up being sometimes the priorities of the cybersecurity arm of the IT department. And if IT is only given a small budget, and their budget is allocated mostly to increasing automation or to deploying more desktops, or just doing things that are more of the routine sort of maintenance of the overall IT environment, not a lot gets left over for cybersecurity, and so that's the paradigm, as you're mentioning, Alokesh, that we need to change. And I think I am seeing that change a little bit in some businesses, where specifically at Sophos, we took the cybersecurity part of our business, so the internal cybersecurity, the people that protect Sophos from the bad guys. We took those guys. We actually put them in my department, which is the office of the CTO, right, the technology department, and took it away from IT, because now, as a company who's focused on producing software, producing hardware, and enabling cybersecurity for others, that technology mindset of what do we need to do now, today, and in the future in order to protect our company needs to be at that decision level of what is, in the same way that we're thinking about, what are we going to do next to protect others, we're thinking about what are we going to do next to protect ourselves, right? And so having that in just a slightly different context within the company really helps us make better decisions. And it's not just about, well, okay, we've got this big project to deploy a new ERP system. That's going to chew up all IT resources. No, let's give them a little bit more free rein, a little bit more visibility across the entire industry, the entire company, in order to see and touch all the different departments that need actual help with respect to their things. Is it finance? Is it HR? Is it the coders, right? Give them the help they need and bring the cybersecurity level up for everybody.
That's very, very interesting. In fact, I'll come to some of the other panelists also with this, whether you're thinking on similar lines. But Rajpreet, you first, you can tell us, what your interactions, what is the sense you get in terms of the importance given to cybersecurity in Indian companies?
Yeah, I think things are changing, not as fast as they should have been, but yes, they are gradually changing. So I have personally been in a lot of board meetings because it has become a board level initiative in many organizations. But if overall at a high level I talk, at the end of the day, it's more of a catch up. Why? Because it's still sitting under IT, whereas we need to either have a chief digital officer, it either needs to sit under the chief financial office, or in many cases maybe a legal office. But because in India we do not have any data privacy regulations as such, so I think it doesn't much sit under the legal office. But things are changing up to some extent, but not as fast as they should have been. And I think why is because what I found was board executives actually were being targeted, and there had been multiple targeted attacks. So their username got compromised, their laptops got compromised, because the hackers and attackers, they're more keen to get the information which is sitting on their laptops. And that is why they were very keen on knowing what is happening and how can they secure their businesses. So yes, things are changing, but it's still a catch-up game most of the times. Whenever I talk to CIOs, most of the conversations are after the business has already made the decision or adopted something, and now it has come to them on how to secure it.
Right. Okay. Balaji, you wanted to come in.
Yeah. So, the way I'm seeing it, there's been significant increase in interest and direction from the board from a cybersecurity perspective.
Okay, that's great.
COVID or otherwise, and to be honest, obviously in all the companies that are represented on this in general, board members are very aware, they're well read, and they know what's happening, right? And they know the right questions to ask, right? So personally, I've seen a lot of interest from the board in getting involved. The other point around which what John and Rajpreet talked about in terms of the information security or cybersecurity being a part of IT. I guess in organizations like ours, it's going to take a while to have a separate CISO organization, if you will, it has kind of relation to IT, right? So, and as a CIO, I've found it very important to look at cybersecurity as a parallel organization logically, right? And when you're talking to executive management, to the board, to the CEO, to the CFO, trying to look at cybersecurity not as a part of IT, but trying to look at it as a separate discipline. And where I've kind of seen more success is to say that the information security, cybersecurity office is being incubated under the IT office, right? And it's going to kind of come in and become a separate organization. But it's important logically to treat it as a completely separate function, because then that's when you'll be able to really work through it.
Yeah, I think in most organizations, it's the same IT people who also handle the cybersecurity aspect, isn't it? It's like you will reach out to the same guy. In my organization, I would reach out to the same person who I have a security issue
Yeah.
or I have a connection issue. The same
But
people.
the logical separation of duties is very important, right? Because I guess all of us in our organization also wear multiple hats. So when I'm wearing the cybersecurity hat, I'm kind of setting aside the CIO hat and looking at it dispassionately. It's difficult, but I don't think we are at a point now, at least for a manufacturing FMCG company like ours, where we can have a completely separate CISO organization. I'm not sure if other panelists share this view.
Yeah, I'm going to come to the other panelists on that. Anand and Porno and Ajay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point Alokesh is definitely it needs to be seen as a very separate entity because the responsibility is huge. The responsibility for ensuring organization security is pretty high, and this is one of the risks which is there on the board agenda as well, because board looks at what are the risks which are there for an organizational continuity or business operational continuity. This being one of the higher agenda, the board is focused in our organization. The board is aligned towards the right investment that need to be done in the cybersecurity framework in terms of enhancing the overall maturity of the cybersecurity framework from what level we are today and the way we need to go in the next couple of months or next year or so. So that's very clearly in the defined path for us. And we have the support of the organization from the senior management also and from the board also to take this forward. I think that helps a lot in terms of deploying the right solutions to secure the organization. And we have been doing that so far so good, and looking forward, we're working in the same method as per our roadmap in terms of securing the organization. The threats are increasing. The threats will increase, and it will be very innovative threats which will come up. Something which we probably wouldn't have even imagined. And we need to be at our toes. We need to be looking at things from a very different perspective, looking at from a hacker's hat and seeing what they can target, what are the vulnerabilities. You will not have imagined some of the things that we are in fact debating on. We are having sessions on in terms of what are the possibilities by external people to attack, what they can do, and there is a host of things which never would have been imagined in the past.
Right. So, Anand and Porno. So, just to, it is obvious that companies are taking cybersecurity more seriously. It's good to know that some boards are also involved in it. It's great. But in that case, why is the investment not increasing? Right. In most of the studies that I've seen, even there is a report from Data Security Council of India, which says that, even in 21, the investments are not going to be on the higher side for cybersecurity. So why this dissonance? Is there really a dissonance? Is there a dilemma? What is the real issue? And Minda and Mondelez are both multinationals. One is Indian and one is an American. So good to have perspectives from both of you. Porno, you want to start?
See, basically, I don't agree with the other panelists on the CISO organization be separate and it has a different focus and other things. But yes, there is a specific focus required, but within IT or outside IT, I don't think that's the issue. Issue is slightly different. Issue is what happens is, security is something which, first of all, people do not understand. I'm talking about the top management and also the users. Because I mean, although we always say security is pervasive, it is there everywhere, but ultimately security is something which is very, I will say, very virtual in nature. So I mean, people don't actually understand what is the issue of security. This is point number one. Point number two is security is always a negative factor. So I mean, we always try to talk positive. We need to have access to a website or some ERP systems or something. Security is something which prevents. So whatever prevents always becomes a negative factor for the human being as by nature. Mm-hmm. So let me come to the actual point. So in my organization, there is a very big focus on security, and especially in information security. I'm telling you why. One of the mandates is, first of all, we are a publicly host, listed company. And in this scenario, there is a clause under Companies Act 2013 on risk management and compliance. So security combined with risk management, obviously not separately, as an identity, but combined with risk management and compliance, there is a specific subject in every board meeting, and we have to report whatever threats have been received by us, how we have combat with the situation, what are the plans we have. We have to update the board members. In fact, in the last AGM also, this question was asked by many of our shareholders. So we have to actually answer them what is the plan we have.
But do you get strong feedback from the board on these issues that you are, the compliance thing that you're doing? What kind of feedback do you get from the board?
No, so they are asking you how we are combating the kind of advanced persistent threats or whatever is going on in the cyber security space. How we are doing what is the plan? What is your action plan? How we are doing the audits? How we are doing benchmarking? In fact, we have recently done a benchmarking on the auto industry in terms of cyber security by Data Security Council, DSCI, under NASSCOM. So they have a cyber security framework. You have to comply to all the questions, and then there is a result coming up where we have scored fairly good in terms of our industry. I mean, obviously, we cannot compare with BFSI or healthcare or education or things which are more, internet in nature. But yes, as far as our organization industry is concerned, we did fairly good. Second thing is, as far as investment is concerned, I think around 10 to 15% at least we are investing in cybersecurity. When I say cybersecurity, it's not always the internet part of the cybersecurity. It is also the internal part of the cybersecurity. That means your antivirus upgradations, EDR solutions, DLPs, your advancement of the firewalls and other stuff, IPS as an example. So I think these are all the programs which we are following for last few years, and I think we have a specific focus on cybersecurity. We have a specific organization called GRC, which is Governance, Risk and Compliance Team, and who handles all the cybersecurity issues and audits and compliance is done. We are also going for ISO 27001 certification and other certification in terms of cyber risk management. Now, the last point what you are discussing about is
the investment.
The investment part. So I think I already told that 10 to 15% we are investing, and we are largely moving towards a cloud-based security. And why I'm saying cloud-based security, because if you have observed in the last 5 years, we used to talk about borderless security. Now it is becoming boundaryless security. What is boundaryless security? When people are working from home or anywhere. I was in Uttarakhand last week of December, and I have seen many families, they have taken vacations, I will say official vacations.
I was also there.
Oh, great. So sitting there for months after months and doing their work from there. I mean, they're not working from home. Please understand. They're working from remote location, and the risk is much, much higher when you are not at least working from your home. So I think looking at the boundaryless, security, we are trying to move a big way to the cloud-based security services, which should be mostly from the perimeter point of view. So that means, I mean, instead of putting a lot of security measures on the devices, on the end users, put the security onto your perimeter. Like example, your application perimeter, infra perimeter, your other the data center perimeters. So try to put the perimeter security stronger, so that whenever anybody accesses your system through VPN or otherwise also, I mean, the end result is like it's a secured connection, or you don't need to get compromised into any kind of scenario. So I think that is what is the future. So cloud-based security and also boundaryless security is the future, and I believe most of the organizations are focusing on that, and we are also on the same track.
In fact, we did want to discuss cloud-based security also here. So Anand, want to take that on as well. Is this the right approach? Is Mondelez also doing it? Even Balaji was saying that Tata has moved completely to the cloud. And so what's your view on this?
Absolutely. I think cloud is the way to go. There's no doubt about it, because you get economies of scale and you get volume, and therefore I think today nobody is debating that that cloud is risky and stuff like that. That is the way to go. Of course, you have to monitor it. You still have to own it. You can't just outsource it to somebody in the cloud and then forget about it. But I'd like to give you maybe a slightly tangential response to the investment thing. I think end of the day, businesses are well versed in managing risk. That's what they do. Businesses are there for growth. They need to grow, and therefore they constantly take decisions on growth, and the flip side of growth is risk, right? And cybersecurity is end of the day, what is it? It is about risk. It is about a threat and a risk to the organization. And I think where security professionals and IT professionals and leaders in this space will need to step up is to be able to translate this risk in business speak. So one of the things that we've learned in this COVID situation is that organizations that bounced back faster are the ones which had some buffers in material and money and cash and stuff like that, right? And essentially, what is it giving? It's giving resilience. So I think investment will follow if you are able to frame the problem in the right way. And I think it's not about endless investment. It's about smart investment. You will need to enable business leaders to say, yes, this is a risk I will take. I will not invest, or I need to invest because this is a risk I cannot take. So I think we need to get to a point where we should be able to monetize or convert the risk into monetary terms. And I think investment will follow. Per se, I have not seen in this organization or any other large organization where investment is truly wanting where you frame the risk in the right way. So I think that's really the crux of it.
Okay, that's great to know. And we have several questions coming in from the audience. And Balaji has raised his hand again. Balaji.
No, I just a quick 30 seconds. I couldn't agree more.
Go on.
I couldn't agree more with Anand. The reason why investment is not coming is because we don't know how to ask for it. To say that, put that out very clearly. Whenever how to ask for it, if you say that I'm going to set up firewalls, I want to do DLP, people won't understand. But you say this is the risk, this is discretionary, this is non-discretionary, this is critical, this is to maintain. Right. If my website is defaced, this is what that means in terms of risk. So I just wanted to the investment will come if you know how to ask for it, right? And as business leaders, you need to ask for it. Right? That's
yeah, as a journalist, it's my job to ask all these questions. I don't want, so I have to ask you these questions just to, put you in the thing. But we have been getting some really good questions, and I will take one question right now. This has come from Amrita Saha from L&T. Amrita, thank you for your question. And she's asking what can be done in terms of, like we've been talking about how we are always chasing the criminals, right? They're one step ahead of us all the time. So what Amrita is saying is what can be done in terms of predictive measures in relation to cybersecurity, considering the recent hybrid warfare attacks that have been across sectors, including healthcare, food companies, and attempts even on strategic sectors by non-state actors. What can we do in terms of preventive measures? John, you want to start on that?
Sure, I can definitely speak about that from our perspective and what we're doing. So one of the things that has been a great enabler in cybersecurity of late, as you probably all know, is the addition of machine learning into all the different aspects of security, right? And so that's one of the ways that we're adding predictive aspects is we're looking at vast volumes of malware out there and saying, how can we categorize these much more easily as they're coming into our labs? We can't have a human analyst as we used to do 20 years ago. We used to have a human analyst look at every single sample that came in and then do something about it. You can't do that anymore. The world has since moved on by orders of magnitude. So having things like machine learning into your products, but at different levels and at different layers is important. So I'll give you an example. Right? We've got some predictive measures, some machine learning in our cybersecurity component, the traditional, let's say, endpoint security component. It's no longer AV. That hasn't existed for a long time. It's the endpoint security that you see today from most vendors is some sort of hybrid between behavioral based and machine learning based, and there's a lot more in there. But that piece is there to look at the code and say, okay, does this look like something that could be malicious, and then prevent it from there. But then you also have opportunities to do it at other layers. So when you're thinking about web access, right? A lot of the emails that come through that have a link to phishing sites or to malware repository sites, there's a theme to it, if you will, so that just by simply looking at the URL itself, we can say that looks like it's going to go somewhere dodgy. So we're going to block that. So that's where machine learning can look at millions and millions of known bad URLs and go, okay, based off of that learning, I can now apply future blocks against URLs that are coming in. And then on the email side, I think it was Parno that was talking about basically business email compromise, right? People getting into your mailbox and the fake invoices, not fake, but the wire fraud, right? We've developed a machine learning model there as well that can understand what these kinds of emails look like, the language that is being used, the urgency, just the way that they're being crafted, and prevent that from happening. So that's another area where in the past maybe all we did was we stopped the phishing, but now we're also stopping things like that wire fraud that you were talking about by understanding the language that is being used and understanding the ways that the cyber criminals are trying to manipulate their way into our organization. So machine learning can do a lot of good in a lot of different areas, but you have to apply it in the right ways and at the right levels in order for it to be effective. And predictive is also about, in my opinion, the human element, right? If you've got a lot of people that are constantly, and I've seen some answers to security awareness in some of the questions that we have here online, if you've got the entire workforce believing and understanding that they are part of the security team, that they are part of the securing the organization, then you've got some predictive ability there as well, because the first person that notices a phishing campaign coming in alerts the SOC, alerts the security people that, hey, something fishy is going on. Now you can get ahead of the problem and potentially stop something before it happens. So I think there's a man and a machine component coming together that can help with predicting threats and making sure that they're not taking over your network.
Is anybody doing it? Are we doing any of these things that John has been talking about? It's open to the panel. Porno?
See, basically, again, I have a different perspective here. I mean, okay, fine. I mean, we can have the best of the machine learnings or AI stuff or something like that. But I can tell you one more interesting thing, which is called back to basics, which is a very traditional and old word, So back to basics means you need to patch your applications, you need to patch your servers, you need to patch your desktops or laptops with Windows patch. Many times what happens is when the security threat happens because your laptop is not patched enough. Antivirus is not updated. Or say for very basic things, firewall, that's called the firmware, is not updated on a day-to-day basis. I think if you do the basics very well, and if the basics are very strong, your the chance of getting attacked is just 5 to 10%. Now, on top of your basics, you need to also have the advanced systems like what John was mentioning, AI, ML stuff, or the latest devices or the latest the softwares. Now everything is becoming software-based security. So obviously the softwares also have to be the latest in nature so that it can prevent this kind of the situations. But I think the basics have to be very well focused upon. Most of the times we forget about the basics and we look at big cyber risk in investments and something like that, which is not the right way to go. I think the first thing and the foremost thing, I'll give an example. In my organization, last 2 years back, we had around 700 Windows XP machines. Now Windows XP is actually outdated. Now, when you have Windows XP machines, you are prone to threats. Any attacker can attack your Windows XP machine at any, and these machines are mostly in the shop floor, where also we have IoT systems and other systems. And we have not touched that topic today because of time, because that's another subject I think which is now penetrating in the entire
we will touch upon IoT soon, shortly.
Okay, great. So I think we are all talking about the perimeter network, the security or the end user security, but IoT, I mean the industrial security is another security which can stop your production tomorrow or your manufacturing process. I think that is why the basic patching, the basic stuff, I think that's most important from my point of view.
Okay. Somebody wants to just add to this?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Perno, and that is what I start as a recommendation.
Okay.
So there are many clients who say that we have some budget allocated and what is the technology, next inline technology. We call it a shiny object syndrome. So
Okay.
I think before adopting any of that, because that will require additional skills, any new technology is going to generate thousands of logs. Get the basics right. If you see the attack vector, still the attackers are exploiting the traditional attack vectors which were exploited years back. Today, most of the ransomware attacks have been targeted using an open RDP port. And this is something as basic as having proper change management process in place. So, I recommend them to have the basic exercises like a vulnerability management program, their existing application security program, change management program, which can change and avoid more than 60 to 70% of attacks, if we get the basics right. While we have that in place, definitely the next in line is to improve our threat response and predict side of things under security operations by using non-traditional and emerging technologies, which will help us improve under the other areas of improving the threat detection, the response piece, and prediction piece. I think that is how it should go.
Cool.
Alokesh,
Yeah.
while I agree with Parna and Rajpreet, I do have resonance with John in terms of the new age threats which are coming in. So while we definitely need to keep monitoring in terms of what is our current status in terms of basics are right, but we cannot neglect the new threats which are emerging because we cannot ignore them at all because these are things which will hit us and they will hit us badly. And we are in fact in discussions with some advanced tools, technologies for deployment for such areas in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence, which basically accumulates a lot of information and then accordingly takes on the decision making for certain areas in this domain. And very shortly we'll be deploying those tool sets.
Anand, before you say your point, I'll also want to ask you about IoT because I'm sure Mondelez, being such a large global organization, you'll be using a lot of IoT devices, sensors, and all, in your manufacturing, right? So, how are you addressing the security aspects? And in fact, we have a question also from the audience, from one of the audience members who's asking, Tamal Sarkar is asking, what will be the best possible ways to restrict IoT-based attacks?
Right. So, Alkesh, interestingly, irrespective of the industry, some of the problems seems to be common, right? I mean, some of it which Parno also alluded to. And this is more so in the case of your manufacturing locations where you've got aging firmware and incidentally, that happens to be the place where you've got most of your IoT set up there. The traditional approach has always been to sort of create a kind of a Chinese wall or a walled garden and keep your manufacturing location isolated or insulated from the other network. Which is now changing with IoT because the power of IoT comes when you're able to really connect those devices, get the data and feed in there. So yes, I think really the first step really is to, as Porno was saying, get your fundamentals quickly in place, and that it looks very unglamorous, but it is the first thing to do. Get your systems all patched up and ready and up to date. And then there are tools, and obviously the risk and the impact of something going wrong on the IoT side is far greater. But then coming back and connecting the dot with the previous question also, see, my perspective is slightly different on this, right? I think the same tools that we have on AI and ML, the hackers also have. I don't think we are carrying something different than what they have, and they perhaps have access to greater computing and resources on these kind of things. It's a question of time, and complexity will increase. So you have to use AI, ML on these areas. That's a given. Yeah, I think therefore, what's the future, right? I think the future one is be prepared for more and more complexity. Things are going to get more complex. Ensure your fundamentals are there, like ensuring your patch cycles, your change management cycles, etc. As Rajpreet was saying, and most importantly, build resiliency in the organization. You're going to get hit. You're going to get hit in a big way or a small way. So when you're going to get hit, how are you going to respond and stand back up as soon as possible with as minimal an impact on the organization and continuity is really the core of what we will have to address. I don't think we can say that field will never be impacted. I think there'll always be somebody who's smarter than you.
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? And Balaji, maybe you can also give us some inputs on the IoT aspect and how Tamal's question on how can we prevent and counter IoT based cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem, right? So and again, with the engineering teams and our manufacturing teams, because our at least definitely in the company that we have, and I'm sure in the manufacturing industry, the life cycle of an industrial asset, a plant and machinery is about 15 years. The life cycle of a IT asset is 5 years, right? So the manufacturing team definitely sweats their asset more than what the technology guys do. So you will always have this dichotomy to say that you have scanners, sensors, PLCs, desktops that are XP, and however much you shout from the rooftops, you're not going to get into refresh cycles for those equipment that are matching with IT. And it's a little bit back to fundamentals. I think people forget about the point that your IT and OT networks have to be separate. And the moment you try and bring them together, you will struggle, right? And it's very easy to say because we've got an equipment that can be maintained remotely, and it's very easy to say that I've got internet bandwidth. I'll just hook you up. Someone can come in and debug your equipment, and then it stays connected together, right? So staying true to the fundamental in terms of keeping your IT and OT network completely separate, physically as much as possible, but definitely logically, I think is very, very important, right? And try to make sure that if there are old equipment, there are Windows XP machines, right? So while try to keep refreshing it, you don't want to say that I need to spend 1 million of PLC hardware if I have to change this XP laptop. You will never win that battle. But how do you isolate it? How do you kind of call out the risk, and how do you mitigate the risk, right? Like everyone has said, this is about articulating the risk and what is the impact and managing it, right? So you say you can have an XP machine as long as you don't connect it to the network and it's just connected to the machine. So trying to work with the IoT team that you get value of information, keeping the networks separate, moving on with your digital agenda while taking care of security. It's sort of a balancing act that I guess all of us need to do.
Okay, I don't want to miss out on anybody's views on this. Anybody has got an additional view on this before I move to a slightly related question from the audience? Porno, you want to say something?
Just a small update. I think when we talk about IoT and IoT security, I think I completely agree with what Balaji said right now. We have also done the similar thing. We have made a 3-layered network. First, the one is the office network. Second, we made the engineering network, and third one is the manufacturing network. So we have isolated all the 3 networks from each other. This is point number 1. This is very, very basic fundamentals. Nowadays, it can be done through the basic switching and routing protocols in your devices. This is the first thing we have done. Second thing is we have tried to make the IoT devices and also the IoT cloud which are there on a higher security mode in terms of like if the basic security stuff is there, we have actually put advanced security stuff on those devices and on those the network and also the cloud services. Third thing is, I think this is the upcoming subject. I think this is going to be discussed a lot in future. IoT in future will be more because you need to have the analytics on the spot. You need to have edge computing largely implemented for your IoT systems. When I say edge computing, that means you need to do the computing on the fly, on the mobile phones, on the iPads, or the machines, or on where we are doing the extracting the data or actually sending the information to the users. I think that combination of edge computing and cloud with the right perspective of security and the segregation of network, which I mentioned in the beginning, will give you right perspective. And also, again, coming back to the first point is back to the basics. When you need to do the patching and the basics very, very well, I think then I think your chances of getting attacked will be reduced drastically.
Right. In fact, and Ajay, yours is a joint venture with Volvo, right? And Volvo is supposed to be the safest car on the planet, right? So I can't not ask you the the IoT question. You have to tell us what sort of security measures can be placed.
See, first of all, the joint venture is for the trucks, heavy-duty vehicles. And yes, IoT is there in terms of from a vehicle's perspective, telematics that have been deployed in terms of engine performance and different parameters of vehicle performance. You're fetching the data for analysis as well as using that for improvement in the vehicle perspective. So this data is basically, it's one way today. We do not push back any information back into the vehicle because that's the dangerous area in terms of remotely controlling the vehicle. Yes, all of this information is definitely here. We've used the cloud security architecture and cloud framework for moving this data onto the cloud, and that's where we are handling this out entirely from a security perspective. There are threats which would probably likely come up when we start with looking at over-the-air kind of facilities where we install patches or software updates onto the vehicles directly from remote. That's an area of concern that is going to come up. And we are looking at from a securing, how do we secure that to ensure that, again, the vehicle performance is not hit. So definitely all those security parameters are being taken up in terms of in discussion with agencies and partner associations to ensure that vehicles do not compromise the safety of a passenger or the goods that are being carried out.
Right. In fact, connected with this whole, separating your networks and making, isolating certain parts, there's a question that's coming from Abhijit Kocharikar, which is, tangentially related to it. And his question is it possible for us to enable office workspace to restrict space on user system on his or her personal laptop, desktop, to enable work from home? You have a dedicated space in the laptop or the desktop, which is for office, and that has a separate layer of security if in case the device is his personal laptop or desktop. Is it possible to do that?
That's possible with Microsoft tools also. It is possible, and with certain mobile device management tools also it is possible to restrict that. And it can create a partition wherein you cannot move your personal data into that, and from there you cannot move official data into your personal space or forward it out to other channels through other channels. That the possibility is there, and we've been looking at some of these tool sets.
Is it like similar to the the usual hard disk partitioning, where you partition the hard disk into 2 or 3 different parts and you have the option?
It's like your mobile device management security, but it creates a partition. It creates a virtual partition, which basically becomes your office space, and then there's a personal space for you for your normal personal operations.
Great. And I wanted to come to another issue that is of importance to people who operate out of home, and even people who come to office, because even earlier we always had this bring your own device policies in different organizations, and right now it's like you're taking the office to everybody's homes. So bring the office home kind of situation has happened. Home Wi-Fi networks are being used, and third-party apps and software are these have always been a challenge to cybersecurity. And but now this threat has multiplied multifold, just like Porno said, from 69 locations you went to 4,000 locations, because every employee has become a location by himself or herself, right? So how do you now manage this whole BYOD and these other challenges? How do you manage this? Because it's okay to say that there are 4,000 locations, but how do you manage the security of all those locations? And all the personal devices is a VPN connection good enough for a work from home? Is it safe enough? You need some other layers.
So I can give my example. As my 90%.
I'll come to John after this on this question.
Sure. My 90% of my applications are on cloud today. Only 10% of the applications are on premise, for which we have a VPN solution, and the number of users are restricted to what we actually intended to give them. And the VPN means, when I talk about VPN, it is basically the SSL VPN. That means you need to have the VPN software downloaded with the right keys to access my system. So this is one. Second thing is, in many scenarios, what we have done is we have given multi-factor authentication. So say, for an example, you're accessing some critical information from our intranet. So without the OTP or something else, you are not able to actually, you will not be allowed to access the information on the fly. So these kind of measures we have also taken during the pandemic. This is point number 2. Point number 3 is we have also, I mentioned in the beginning, if you remember, we have actually implemented a solution. I don't want to name the vendor right now, but there are solutions in the market which can do monitoring of your devices in terms of productivity and security both. And this is a very interesting solution we have found out in the market, and we have deployed it very fast. So these are the 3 things we have done. And when you have deployed that, the productivity and security both solution, this solution actually we are talking about the devices of the employees itself. So it's not about the devices which we have provided from the organization. And last thing, I can just highlight that most of the data we are trying to now, it's under process, and at least at this point of time, we are trying to put every data point into our server. So you are not actually working on your machines or the local drives, you're actually working on the virtual machine. So that means your data is always on the cloud, or with the control is always with the organization. Whatever they want to do with the data, they can do. I mean, the employee access to the data is there, but the ownership of the data is always with the organization, physically also. These are the things I think we have done.
I must say that I must be following one of your best practices, Porno, because all the data that I have in relation to this organization work, all the work that I do is on the OneDrive, right? So it's on the cloud. I have nothing on my hard disk. So if my computer crashes tomorrow, I lose nothing, right? Everything is there. But John, I wanted to come to you with that question.
The points that Porno is bringing up are really valid points in terms of how to provide access. I'll take just a slightly different view of that and talk about how as employees of companies, we are given tools and we are given guidance into how to act securely within the context of our company and the way that we interact with the company systems. And I think what gets lost sometimes is when we go home, a lot of people forget that they have other computers at home that they need to treat with the same mindset. So security is it's a lifestyle now. It's not the thing that you just do at work. It's the thing that you need to carry through your entire life. So if you're using multi-factor authentication at work, you need to use it at home as well, because the cyber criminals, if they can get into your home computer or they can compromise your home webmail address, they might use that against you and against your company. So having that security mindset constantly and being, vigilant about cyber threats, not only on your work machine, because if you get it wrong there, you might get fired. It can also impact you at home. So having that mindset throughout your life is really important, and taking these lessons, applying multi-factor authentication, using security software on your home computer. Anybody who buys Sophos Endpoint gets licenses for their employees to use on their home computers as well. So we try to protect the entirety of the organization as well as the extensions. So it's just think secure all the time, and you're going to reduce that risk that we've been talking about since the beginning of this conversation.
Right. And Rajpreet, what I wanted to understand from you, given your, very nice kind of vantage position that you have in terms of conversations with the organizations and giving them advice and all, do you see, this pandemic has really given us a kind of it has been more like a tipping point into an acceleration in digital transformation, right? As well as into cyber security, issues. But do you feel that companies, especially in India, and we're not talking of the really large, very well organized companies that are on this panel necessarily, there are so many others outside. Have we really learned enough to take the next pandemic on without much problem?
Yeah, I think one of the key points which we have to remember is that the majority of enterprises in India fall under the SMB category. So the couple of learnings which I would like to highlight is what this pandemic has shown us, that no matter what the size of your organization is, you can be targeted with attacks. I've spoken to so many SMBs who were targeted with specific attacks, be it layer 7 attacks or layer 3 attacks, and they were never under attack before. They had always been operating and working in the closed networks. So be today or tomorrow, you will have to embrace the digitalization, move to the cloud and remote working. And the pandemic situation suddenly led them to have that kind of infrastructure where they had to have employees working from home. So I think that has been one of the biggest learnings. Second is, I would say that strategic security planning is a waste of time unless it is aligned with the business strategy, and it accommodates technology that aligns with the speed of the change in the business. So like we had been talking about since the initial phases of this conversation, that cybersecurity has to be a board level initiative. Then definitely get the basics right, but yes, now our networks are evolving. So only relying on the traditional ways to secure them is not the right mindset and mindhood. This whole pandemic led to newer technologies evolve in the market. Technologies like SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, cloud security technologies like cloud workload protection platforms, micro segmentation platforms, cloud security posture management platforms. So I think one thing which we have to be really open with is that the cloud is not a traditional form of network, and the way we have to secure it is by using dedicated technologies to secure the cloud side of things. And then just touching down on what we were discussing on BYOD and the data sitting everywhere, I think a very simple answer to that is zero trust network architecture. The entire idea of zero trust network architecture evolved about data sitting anywhere. So the best practice for an enterprise is just secure the data right where it is hosted by using technologies like SASE, so that any user who is accessing it, no matter which device, no matter which network, there are the right privileges, there is a right amount of threat detection and prevention which is applied, and secure the data where it is hosted, be it on a particular cloud by using the native policies as well as the third-party tools. And then evolving the security operations beyond the traditional environment to involve cloud as well as the roaming users, technologies such as UEBA, in which we can analyze the behavior of the users, and technologies such as fraud detection platforms will help organizations to better equip themselves as the next phase on how to deal with these evolving networks.
We are almost totally out of time. Before I come to John to summarize the key insights and thank everybody, I would just like to take one final audience question to Anand and Balaji. And the question is from Vandit Upadhyay. And the question is, what are the best practices or checklists for cybersecurity to follow when a company starts moving all workload to public cloud? Is there a list of things? Are there some 3-4 things that companies should be looking to, keep track of?
A consulting answer is there is no depends, right? But having said that, I think it's important to have a framework, right? And whether it is cloud or elsewhere, and from a technology perspective, like what Rajpreet was saying, cloud is very different, needs different technology. But where I found it most useful is sort of a 2x3 matrix framework, right? So what are you doing in terms of proactive and reactive? That's sort of one axis. And the other axis is around people, process, and technology. And this is not sort of something that's new in the technology world. What is it from a cloud perspective? And there are a lot of checklists, there are a lot of frameworks, there are a lot of public cloud, and I guess you go to the Gartner site, you will find these checklists and framework and quite a lot of them. But the point is, what is relevant for you, what works for you, and what is it that you kind of want to go forward and look at, right? So from a security perspective, you need to follow the basics. From a proactive perspective, do the patching of your assets, look at setting up your firewalls, etc., etc. Clear about, and there was a short discussion that we had earlier around time to respond, how do you respond, and how do you detect what's happening, right? The other aspects, again, around people, right, and what's the behavior of people, what's the process you're setting up, and then the technology. And to me, I talk technology at the end because that always follows, right? So I don't know if there is a kind of silver bullet answer to that question. There's a lot of material out there, but how do you make it work, and what's the framework you want to implement for your organization is what's important.
Anand, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Balaji. Fundamentally, there is no one single thing, and at a transactional level or a project level, people can download and get access to a lot of these checklists about moving workload to the cloud. But what I'd like to add is that you should not look at it only from that perspective, even though you're basically working on moving the workload to the cloud. You need to look at your holistic how that activity is changing your risk profile or your cybersecurity risk profile. So, and there are enough maturity tools out there like the NIST framework, etc. So a better way to do it, or a overarching framework, would also be to layer on to say that where you are standing today in terms of your maturity, and what this movement to the cloud, the workload movement to the cloud, will do to that. Is it increasing? Is it reducing? And therefore, do you need to take some actions which perhaps just a narrow checklist on that project may not throw out? So that's my additional bit. But otherwise, I think Balaji's covered it. I think there are checklists out there. Yeah.
Thank you so very much to all our panelists. We are out of time, so I would just invite now John to please, tell us what the key insights were today, and thank everybody.
Yes, so I was taking some notes as everybody was speaking, and I think there's a couple things that came out is right off the top is all threats are still relevant, right? We talk about ransomware a lot, but we've heard from Parno and some of the other panelists that they're still facing phishing, they're still facing wire fraud, they're still facing all sorts of threats. So let's not look solely at ransomware as a problem that needs to be solved. Let's look at cybersecurity and cyber threats in general, and how do we solve all of them as much of them as possible with the work that we do. And cloud adoption is one of the things that seems to be represented with a lot of these organizations, and I think a lot of the people that are listening are also probably thinking about cloud adoption, and it's a great enabler. It helps move the business forward, but it's not a silver bullet. We know that, right? And we've seen some big outages in the last week or so, in the last month actually, with some other Google went down. When's the last time you saw Gmail go down? So it's not a silver bullet. It can still happen. So you still have to plan for it. You still have to have contingencies in place to keep the business moving, even when these big cloud properties fail you sometimes. So having monitoring, having the ability to recover, having maybe multiple clouds that can back each other up is something that you need to talk about, because there's still going to be some risks there. And then what I think is the topic, or the thread that weaved its way through this whole discussion was that security it's about maturity, right? So it's where do you sit on the spectrum of security maturity, and it's a journey. So as Parno said and some of the others said, the basics need to be done. If you're going to build a house, you have to build a solid foundation and then build up from there. And that really is important. You need to do your patching. You need to make sure that you've got the little things that we've known for decades about how to do security right. Have those in place first, then start looking towards future emerging technologies, better protection, and more of anything, right? So as we're doing that, what we want to do is we want to turn security into an enabler, right? That's part of that discussion that you're having with the board is instead of saying it's just negative, it's just going to block stuff, say, here's how I can help you move your business forward. So turn it into a positive and make sure that people understand that security is going to drive the business into the next decade and help you do more with what you have. And finally, there's no one size fits all, right? So all the stuff that we've talked about, all the advice that we've been giving, which is appropriate for our businesses, might not necessarily apply to yours. So you need to look at your business. You need to understand how it operates. You need to understand what the different stakeholders are. If, you've got engineering, you've got R&D, you've got finance, you've got HR. How can I help all of these businesses? And then what do I need to put in place in each area in order to enable that business, move it forward? But that's respective to me and my business and will work for us. So I think with all that said, security is this continuously evolving thing. Just as the cyber criminals are continuing to evolve, we're continuing to evolve our defenses and our approaches to protecting against these threats. So I hope we've given you some things to think about, some ways that you can probably improve your organization going forward. And with that, I'll thank all my panelists and our moderator as well for putting this together. And hopefully we can all go forward in the future as a more secure group of security professionals.
Thank you very much, John. Big thanks to Sophos for enabling this conversation for the Economic Times. Big thanks to all the panelists, Rajpreet, Balaji, Ajay, Parno, Anand, John, yourself joining us very, very early morning from Toronto in Canada. Thank you all very, very much for joining us. Thank you to all the people who joined in to listen in and ask the questions. Unfortunately, we could not take all the questions. We had quite a few. And I hope that this session has ended with some learnings for all of us. Thank you all very, very much. Goodbye.